No,
Right.
no, it doesn't need to start right then. Yeah, just a public meeting. It's, is what we gotta shoot for.
And then the YouTube live feed, I think is getting ready to start if it has.
Did you guys get all your online benefits enrolled?
I haven't yet.
Yeah, Aaron, get that done.
Well, it says it'll pay period. It's supposed to say per month. So I'm not all that
Oh, I
interested.
sent Debbie and
Is she getting here?
Morning.
Good morning, how are you?
How are you? Good. I think if I laid in the middle of the floor, I'd disappear. Be like a committee.
When's that due, Jared?
Tomorrow?
Tomorrow.
No,
Nothing like waiting till the
The
last
18th.
minute.
I think it's the
18th, I'm sorry, the 18th.
Well, and then today's the 14th. I still got
You
3
got,
more days.
hey, you got, yeah,
I got lots of time.
just ignore that.
Well, yeah, absolutely. On the 18th, is that like midnight or something?
Saturday,
Tuesday.
is that a Tuesday?
Uh-huh.
Let me tell you, our problem is with open enrollment, is your first check, right, in September?
Well, I mean, it just keeps going.
But yeah, I mean, we gotta update your first check with whatever benefit
Oh, yeah.
you selected. And to get those files correct, we have a really narrow window.
yeah, I think September 3rd has got to be there by September 3rd because we're.
Right, right.
September. Kicks in October 1st. So, yeah.
So what happens after open enrollment, our benefit TDA will start building the benefit file, that will start kicking back and forth between Blue Cross Blue Shield. Last year, that took forever to get correct, because Blue Cross Blue Shield upgraded their system. So making that first payroll is fun. I hope this year is better. But
Everything seems to take longer this year.
the frustrating thing was Blue Cross Blue Shield didn't share with anybody that they had done that, and they changed a bunch of parameters in the file.
So, who was right? Probably Sarah. She has
Is that the
a
microphone?
problem.
Sure.
Everybody has their benefits enrolled?
Yes.
No?
I was gonna say, I know of one, two,
Already got told.
so,
I kinda, because it doesn't say the right thing and you're done, I am holding off.
oh.
I wanna see it say
If
per
you
month.
go into the literature that you get it, it says it correctly.
Crap, I
But
know, they
the little
bill.
thing that comes up on the screen,
I know, that's people, I mean, I truly get people kind of.
I just don't understand this.
I think this is something that's been going on before I ever got here.
That's how it works, right?
Huh?
That's how it's supposed to work, right?
Right,
Yeah.
right, but like I said, if you go further into the literature, it talks about the correct amount.
Oh my gosh, look at
So
there.
you just look at what's on the screen.
And that's what people send me. I
I
get
know,
screenshots.
Tell them to go.
I know they have them, we've seen one.
That's what I'll tell them.
Dig deeper.
I told them, I said, let's just take the chill pill.
Yeah.
And it actually starts to come out of your check and it's paper.
And it's wrong.
Then we're gonna get. concerned.
All those
Right now,
parent,
it's just
all those
making sure
parent
that the right
hours I
check.
spent when Ethan was at the UI, surely Morrissey will send me one of them Trojan masks.
One
Hey,
of the fancy masks.
one of them fancy masks.
You know what, I
So they
bought
just
I did 5 extra masks.
That's it. I don't want to be one that's on.
I think the meeting with the non-publics went fine.
Yeah.
You?
Oh, I thought you had.
Yeah, Stacy said that she had all Oh,
I know, but you haven't, like, so have you been able to calculate
Yeah,
Is this
I mean,
2021, is that available?
Because then
How
you
is
can
supposed to
send
get
them,
copied?
letting them know. that,
Just looked up. If they want, of course, it's all online.
I still get a sound.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Laura?
I got people asking that, so I asked Laura.
Window sign in window, ease of access, button.
I've never heard him talk to me before. I'm like, well, good morning, sir.
Unchecked area reads a lot of text on the screen. Check box.
It's just a blank screen.
This was
So there's a man and a boy. Like computers talking. I don't know.
Magnifier can enlarge part of the screen. On screen view
Yeah.
window sign in window.
Yeah, the thing about it is, we don't, this is a reimbursement, so we won't draw this money, and we, I mean, any grant, I mean, we only take the indirect out of what we draw in that period. Yes, I think we better use it at FY, our indirect cost rate, FY21, which is about 4.7. Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't.
So I said, if she gets home.
Allocation.
I'll switch. So we're further down.
Hold it out.
And then he starts talking, I'll throw it out.
Further down this way.
I don't go places when I'm alone, certainly not.
I've never more contacted anyone, so I.
No matter what you think. Yes.
I don't know. Sometimes.
What is it, you say the quiet part out loud?
Of course, it's not nice.
Can you hear me? Okay. Everybody hear me?
Not really.
Not through the mic.
I think I turned it on for you.
Hello? Hello?
You gotta talk just a little bit louder. I can hear you tap it.
Hello? Hello?
Cause this is the Gary Mickey Show.
Do I have to click to my nose?
before we get started, we are short one member of our team, Jermaine, won't be here this morning. She sustained an injury yesterday, and so is getting that tended to this morning, so.
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah, we are too. So, and we will miss her, she's our elementary voice, so I think it'll be okay.
Your side ready, Cinda?
Hold on just a second, my IT department was,
I think so.
okay, it's working on mine.
Okay, good.
Okay, good morning, we are ready.
Good morning.
Morning.
Today, we were scheduled to begin discussions on economic items. Since we have concluded all of our discussions relative to our non-economic proposals that were exchanged. What we would like to do, if it's okay with you, is to start those discussions with a financial overview of exactly where the district is from a financial standpoint. And we're going to ask that our team member and General Director of Fiscal Services, Gary Genke, provide that overview for everybody here in the room.
And I believe he's given us a folder, is that correct?
Yes.
Kind of what you're going to be going through, is that correct, Gary?
Yeah, I'm just gonna go, listen to just page by page, they're
Okay.
numbered, hopefully they've been stapled in order.
No,
So as not to get out of order, confuse anybody, I'll try to express my thoughts clearly and slowly, because oftentimes there's a lot of information to digest, and I understand that. And I look at this every day, and Laura looks at this every day, so you can get a little bit jaded. And as you see, the cover is budget at a glance. The full budget document is about 128 pages. And you probably only want to take a glance at it. It's like looking at the sun. It hurts if you stare at it too long. Most of the pages in this document are straight out of our KSDE budget document. And when we get that posted online after our budget hearing next Thursday, we're scheduled to have our hearing to hear any questions, comments, or protests on our proposed budget. And then we'll ask our board to adopt. Then we will post all of these documents online. We'll take it down Friday and certify it with the county so they can begin their work that's necessary in order to collect the local taxes for this year's budget. And we'll also upload it to KSDE, and that all has to be done, required by statute to be done by August 25th. Okay, so we have some statutory requirements on that August 25th date. Can't miss that one. So I'm just going to begin. The things that I really want to convey today is just our discussion, unfortunately, from last year of continued declining enrollment. And as we discussed last year, I thought, anticipated that would be another problem this year. It is. I want to talk about a little bit about the economy in general and our foundation aid, and then high density at risk. Just at risk in general, okay? Because such a large portion of our budget is contingent on those at-risk dollars. A large majority of our students are free and reduced, in that mid to upper 70 percentile. The balance of our kids probably have IEPs, probably 24% of our kids, I think. We can talk about that. So those are the things that overall or broadly, I think we need to have in mind, and we certainly had in mind as we developed the budget this year. If you go to page two is the notice of hearing. We refer to it as the Code 99. And this is the document that was published in, I believe, August 8th's paper, if you notice that. We are required to publish this document. This document is required to be a public document for 10 days prior to the full board reconvening and adopting the budget. So it's required by statute to be out there 10 days for the patrons of any school district to review it, look at the levies that are being levied, or the mills that are being levied, and to develop any questions or comments or protests that they would like to do. So the Code 99 was published on August 8th. We'll be asking our board next Thursday, the 20th, to adopt this budget after the hearing, after we close the hearing. The things that I think are important to understand about that document are that there are 3 columns of data. The 2 left columns are actuals for the most recent previous 2 years. So you see actuals for FY19, actuals for FY20, and then FY21 is proposed or estimated. And we have to keep that in mind because we do budget with the thought that we would rather not republish sometime during the year. With school budgets, governmental budgets, you can always spend less than your adopted budget authority, but you can't spend more. So we told the public, we've adopted this budget. These are the amounts that we expect to spend. You can always spend less than we do because our legal max after audit will always come in lower or has come in lower. So we need to keep that in mind, and we'll develop that thought a little further. And the very far right column is just the amount of tax we levy and the estimated mill levy or tax rates, $1 per 1,000 of the value of your home. That's a whole nother calculation that we could talk about at another date if you'd like. But overall, our proposed budget is really in line where we were last year, anticipating about $31.7 million in local taxes to be collected, and that includes the 20 mills statewide. So every school district's Code 99 will have it 20 mills. That's a statewide levy. And then our LOB levy at 16.6, our capital outlay levy at 8, which is the maximum amount of mills that we could levy there. We can't levy higher. Our special liability or our legal defense fund at 1.26 mils. And our debt service on our bond and interest debt for our 2014 bond issue at 4.084, which is a little bit lower than it was last year. For a proposed mill levy of 49.963 compared to last year 50.563 and the year before 50.754. So a slight decrease in mill, and that really is due to our part and parcel, for the most part. Interest rates have been very favorable, and we have refinanced much of the 2014 debt at a lower interest rate. So we're able to achieve a couple of things: lower interest rates, and we're also going to pay those bonds off 5 years earlier. So the initial debt would have paid out the final principal payment in 2044. And with refinancing of those issues, the final debt payment on our FY 2014 issue will pay out in 2039. Okay? But that is the entire budget on one sheet of paper. Okay? I want to kind of have you focus on one line, and we'll develop this thought again later. Code 7 is our federal funds. And you can see from 19 actual to 20 actual, we had a slight decrease, 12.5 to 12.4. Many reasons, mainly our title dollars continue to decline. We'll develop that thought later. but also our food service fund fell victim to the COVID pandemic, just like everything else. We were unable to deliver the volume of reimbursable lunches from March through May, created about a $1.5 million revenue problem, just those 3-month period for our food service program. But then you go to the right and see 15.8 million proposed budget, and you think, well, gee, there's some optimism there. And the optimism is we got some CARES dollars in May, okay? About 3.4 million in CARES dollars. So there's the optimism. And those dollars have, to a great degree, been spent. We've been very busy. I think we use some of those dollars to continue our food service program during the stay-at-home order. We have kept our transportation company in business because we anticipate needing school buses, we hope, this fall. So we got to maintain our infrastructure, and we continue to pay everybody in the district, continue to pay our employees. So we've been very fortunate in that regards. But we've also been very busy spending those dollars on PPE. A lot of things for the classroom in anticipation of trying to make that a safer space. But the increase in proposed budget authority there simply is those CARE dollars. We don't anticipate a great big bump in title revenue or food service revenue for that period. Anybody has any questions about a Code 99, its purpose or value? I'll entertain it now, or we'll go to page 2. Page 2 should be a graph of base state aid per pupil. Did we get it in the right order? I hope. So there's a graph. It has a great big upwards right red line and kind of a funky blue line that stays kind of flat and then makes an effort to go up, and it stays up for a little bit and then it goes down. So I think this is important as a foundation, just to understand foundation aid. I started this in a base year of 1993 at base state aid in 93 was $3,600, okay? If we would take that $3,600 in the base year and adjust it for inflation, the consumer price index, we would end up in this budget cycle, 2021, at a foundation or base state aid per pupil at $6,440 per student. If we, in 1993, we would have just followed inflation. Okay? We're not there. This year we're at $4,569. Okay? Per student. The things that I have indicated in 2009, that budget cycle, base state aid per student was $4,400. You see that? And then we had the Great Recession. And the state, like all states, when the economy makes an abrupt, sudden turn, has revenue problems. And the state of Kansas had revenue problems. Mid-year, that base state aid was reduced mid-year. And we'll talk about mid-year base state aid reductions because they do happen. And you can see there was about a four-year period of declines from 4,400 to we settled at 3,838 for 2013 and 2014. So we had a 4-year period of decline. And then we got the block grant. And the block grant said, hey, 4 more years of what you got is what you get. What you had is what you get. Doesn't matter what happens to your costs. Doesn't matter about inflation. Our governor said, what you got, you should be glad to get. And foundation aid was at $38.52, and it stayed flat then through 15, 16, 17. During that period of time, you all saw in the paper, we had a lot of court battles, a lot of fussing. Since then, we've had a change in governorship, and I feel that very positive. With a positive Supreme Court ruling, you saw in 2018 that start to go back up. It started from 3852 to 4006. But the reality is it took 10 years to get us back to the 2009 dollars. We were at 4,400, and it took us the last fiscal year to get us past that $4,400 point. Last year, our foundation aid was $4,436 per student. It took a 10-year runway to get us back to where we were in 2009. It's just what it is. I'm not trying to make a point of fairness or unfairness, but just a point that that's the reality. The good news is the Supreme Court again ruled in favor of schools, so we're back to not the you get what you had. We're back to a formula based on students and the type of students. Are they at-risk students? Are they special needs students? But kids count, right? And that's the state of Kansas motto: kids count. So we're back to a student formula-based finance with an increasing a step up state aid. So this year we're at 45.69. Last year 44.36. The anticipated rate for 2022 would be 4,706. For 2023 would be 4,846. And then in FY24, the school finance formula says we'll then go to adjusting base state aid per student to the inflation index. My hope is that 45.69 sticks for the balance of this fiscal year. We've certainly budgeted because we don't have any choice. Our calculations based on our student estimates are calculated at that 45.69. You all see the news, you read the papers. We have a tremendous amount of people unemployed. We have an upcoming election. I think there's a lot of things about the structure of our national economy that makes me a little nervous. You also, not my number, you've seen a reported estimated deficit for this fiscal year by June 30, 2021, the state of Kansas. About a $653 million deficit based on revenue. School districts are plus 50%, 50, 52, 54% of the state's general fund budget. When I first took over this position in 2015, we had a mid-year when we went to the block grant under the Brownback administration. We had a mid-year reduction in state aid. That mid-year reduction, January, peeled our budget back about $3.6 million. And those state aid dollars were isolated in capital outlay state aid, some impact to that LOB, bond and interest, and capers, right? So you've seen oftentimes when the state, gets kind of in a financial pickle, that state aid for capers, which is our employer contribution for all of us that work hard. That's one of the first things, or historically has been one of the first things that have the states withheld. We just haven't made those employer contributions to capers, and we can develop that a little bit because in a recent budget cycle, we only received 2 of the 4 quarters of capers employer contributions. Last year we received all 4. Our capers contributions, or the employer portion, which is 6%, I think it went up this year to 6.1, but that's a flow through. So the state of Kansas dumps it in our bank account. We record it in our budget, but that money is pulled out and sent to capers, right? It's not in our bank account, probably a minute and a half. That it is a pass-through payment. But it's still reflected in our budget authority. But there is a recent example of only receiving 2 quarterly payments. And you don't have to go back to the block grant. And I'll talk about that a little bit further. Does anybody have any questions on foundation aid and where we started in '93, where we landed in 2009 at the pinnacle, $4,400. We had some economic problems nationally, statewide. So the commitment was reversed. My point with this is when they do that, and I'm not Nostradamus, I'm not predicting that. I'm just telling you we got to be prepared for it. The bigger thing, I guess I'm trying to drive home is when I look at history, it takes a long time to make that ground back up. That's what bothers me. It takes a long runway to get back to where we were. So those are things I'm concerned about. They really are things I'm concerned about.
So are you
For all of us.
concerned or anticipating a mid-year pullback on funds from the state once yeah, you're right, the fall's looking messy. And we don't know where we're gonna end up in January, and I understand you have to be prepared for it, but, and I've read lots of things, some say, we're gonna be fine, but next year's gonna be ugly, the next fiscal year, and others are concerned about shortcuts during the year. So, what's your level of concern?
High. All right, let's move to page 4. And I hope conceptually this builds on the foundation aid and what happens when we have growing foundation aid, but we have declining enrollment. What does that do to the first couple of line items on our Code 99, the general fund and the supplemental general fund? Hopefully your page 4 has 3 columns and a couple of yellow lines. Okay. So the far left column, FY21 budget. So if you looked at general fund budget authority, 103,995,920, and you went back to the Code 99, it would be that number. This is right off our Code 99. That 103,995 is comprised of special education, state aid, and estimated regular ed, general aid, foundation aid plus our weightings. So if you add the 86,249 and the 17,746, should get you that 103. The right 2 columns, you look at FY20 budget and FY20 actual. FY20 budget at the $4,436. Our budget authority, if you go back and look at our Code 99, we started the budget year, we adopted 104,232,511. 86,808 in regular general state aid, 17.4 in special education state aid. $4,436 did not change. The adopted foundation aid per student was our legal max. Foundation aid per student did not change. What changed was our student count. So what we actually ended up with, we adopted 104 million. We ended up legal max at $102,184,223. Our special education state aid adopted budget 17.4 million. We ended up with 16.7 million, or 4%, about 4% less. And our general fund weighted state aid about 85.4 million, 1.52%. Same thing with our LOB, our adopted LOB budget. In the 4436 column budget, FY20 budget was a little over 35 million. Our legal max was 34.4 million. The LOB is driven by a percentage of the general fund budget, okay? So school districts can currently, under the current formula, depending on what your board would have adopted and allowed, I believe, you can adopt between 31% and 33% is the maximum of your general fund budget, okay? So we, at the time it was possible, the district, our board, did a resolution, did adopt, actually held a vote in our community at the time. We had to have a vote. Our community voted to allow us the ability to levy our LOB up to 33% of our legal max general fund, okay? So we can, depending on what our budget situation looks like, we could dial it back. We could go back to 31% or 32%, but we can't go over 33% of whatever our total general fund budget allows us. I can tell you, we've maxed, we've been at the 33% for 3 years. I mean, we have full throttle our LOB. We can't get more operating dollars. We can't wring more operating dollars out of the LOB. We maximize it at 33% every year. But again, the LOB, because after audit, legal max general fund goes down, that LOB is going to follow the general fund because it's simply a percentage of the general fund budget authority, okay? LOB follows the general fund. Does that make sense? So our LOB adopted at 35,045,000. Our actual budget authority came in at 34.4 million, or about a 1.79% decrease. So if we go back to the first column, the FY21 budget, based on current historical enrollment numbers, leaving our foundation aid at 4569, thinking that will stick for the balance of the fiscal year, I would still anticipate our legal max to be down a little bit from what we've budgeted. Again, remember, you could always spend less than what you, to the public, you're going to spend, but you can't spend more without republishing. I would anticipate the general fund budget coming in somewhere around 101.9 million, and the LOB, again, is going to follow, hooked to the general fund, 33% of that, which is 33,855. Now, if you took 33% times the 101 purely, you're not going to land exactly there. The LOB, instead of this year being calculated at it catches up. The LOB and the general fund will be equalized to the point where whatever foundation aid is for the general fund will be foundation aid for the LOB. So we look at the general fund and the LOB combined because they're really our operating dollars, what we can use for salaries, for electricity, for water, for all of those operating type things. We look at them in conjunction. At the upper right of that page, 136,601,750 was our legal max in FY20. Anticipating some softening after audit. You know, this is an estimated number. That coming in at about 135.8 million. It's just a decline in actual dollars to spend, I believe, of about 794,000, or about 0.60 points off of 100. And so I'd anticipate the general fund will decrease in actual dollars to spend by June 30 of 2021. And just due to a step increase for our certified $500 step increase is about $508,000. Note, on that special education state aid is based on categorical aid, and we kind of back into special education state aid, and we back into FTE. They don't just count kids with IEPs. Special Ed Foundation aid is actually calculated by the number of certified staff it takes to provide instruction for those students, plus the paras. And you get a dollar amount for those folks, which is called categorical aid. Certified staff count as 1, but paras only count as 0.4, I believe. So then with special education, you get that weighting plus your transportation weighting, because we know our special needs students take special transportation. And those two things combined is a state aid dollar amount, and that's where the 17.4746750 comes from. And then to get FTE for special ed, they just take that number and divide it by 4569. So that's why I said they kind of back into this special ed FTE. Every other, regular ed, at-risk kid, that they're counting students. But we kind of back in, we calculate FTE for special ed a little differently, okay? The other thing that happens there is we set a budget authority based on that categorical aid, and there's a form that we use to calculate our special ed state aid. State aid due from staff, teachers and paras this year is at $29,510. It's been as high in the last 2 years, a little over 30,000. But that number again, not only can your FTE change and impact the dollars in state aid, your transportation costs can affect your dollars in state aid for special education. The state can change that categorical aid number mid-year. And it could be a higher number, it could be a lower number. We've had both in the last 3 years. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about enrollment. So you can see increasing foundation aid is beneficial. We certainly appreciate that, but our page 5 kind of talks about our enrollment and really what we're experiencing here. And this again, right out of our budget summary or budget at a glance. This is not a document that I created. This is driven out of data that we enter into the state budget document. And these are audited numbers. But FTE enrollment for computing state foundation aid, and not to get in the weeds, but just simply, you're very intelligent folks. I mean, as the years increase to the right, we've got a declining, downward sloping line. And when you're,
Yeah, there.
are they out of order?
There's big movement, correct, but that's, we're looking at this one, right?
Are you looking at that one, page
Yes.
5?
It says page 5.
It says page
It
5.
comes after page 6.
There are a couple of them that.
I'm sorry. Okay, this is what I'm talking about. See, that's why I thought I put page numbers on there for a reason. But it wasn't for you, it was for me, right? Like I told you earlier, looking at this is like looking at the sun a little bit sometimes. So it is what it is. Our enrollment is declining, and it has for certainly the past 5 years. Okay.
But also with declining enrollment, we have fewer staff members needed because we don't have this, like we know that there have been buildings that have cut back.
Yeah.
Certainly at the secondary level, we're cutting back, staff member from social studies or language arts or of the different content areas. So I'm not saying the agenda's with you, but I'm just curious to know, I'd like to look at a graph like this for staff. You know, how many we have then and how many we have now. So, anyhow.
Lucinda, I don't have those numbers with me, but I can tell you that we did not adjust staff at the same pace that enrollment declined. The staffing adjustment really is just now catching up to enrollment this year.
So I did anticipate that question, and we can do this very quickly. If you fast forward to page 7, and the only thing I want you to look at is total staff. And this is all employee classes, administrative, certified, and classified, okay? 16, 17, we had, and I got a note here, that don't say belly buttons. We're talking about human beings here. 2,219 staff members. 2017, 18, we had 2,221 staff members. 2018, 19, we had 2,237 staff members. Year in 2019, 20, we had 2,205 staff members. So as the deputy superintendent commented, we have had some reductions in that arena, but they certainly haven't been at the same pace as our reduction in students.
I already, for the decrease in the coming year, it says 1920. Have we seen a decrease or an uptick in the coming year for 2020, 21? And if so, was that influenced by COVID? Do you know?
We do have a decrease. Some, it's hard to pinpoint exactly what may have been COVID related, but some of those decreases were actually orchestrated and planned. Decreases to more right size our staffing to more better align with what our enrollments are going to be.
So I've got some numbers that I've added in those graphs. We're still on page 5. In the middle of those pages, you can see, just for example, what I'm talking about. If you look at 2019-20, the 12,607.6. On September 20, 2019, that would be, the official count date for FY20, we had, our audited numbers were at 12,480 kids, okay? Foundation aid for 1920 was calculated at a little higher rate because in the finance formula, and this is good news, this is a positive thing, under the finance formula, you can do this with your foundation aid. You can take your current year count. So in this instance for FY20, our September 20, 2019 count is 12,480.1 students for foundation aid. Or if in a situation as ours, you have declining enrollment, you can go back 2 years and pick the highest of the most recent 2 years. And so we obviously chose that because we didn't like 12,480 and we didn't like 12,730. So for the FY20 budget, we went back, clear back to the September 20, 2017 enrollment of 12,976.9 for our foundation aid. And that's purely 12,976.9 multiplied by the 4436, okay, for your foundation aid. Your weightings, so your pre-K, your at-risk, your special education, your bilingual, your career tech ed, all the balance of your weighted enrollment is based on current year. You can't go back to, that would be really nice if you could just go back to for all of them, but you can't. So your foundation aid, your head count type enrollment, you can take the current year. You know, if we would have gained some kids, that would have been nice, but we didn't. You take your current year or the highest of the previous two. Okay. Then your weightings are current year. So page 6, the chart behind that is simply a breakdown of foundation aid at the top, including our 4-year-old at-risk folks, and then our weighted enrollment. So if you look at FY21, for example, everything at the 450.5, which is the weighted low and high enrollment, bilingual, everything below that and below is going to be based on the September 2020 count. Okay? Our foundation enrollment is going to be based on either the higher of our September 2020 count, or we can go back 2 periods. We anticipate our enrollment on September 20 at 12,263 students. September 20 a year ago, we were at 12,480. Back up another year, September 20, 2018, 12,730 students. We can't go back to the 12,976. That's 1 year too long behind us. So we can't go back to the 12,730 for our foundation aid, but everything below that will be calculated at what I would anticipate around the 12,263 or hope. We have that many students. And those calculations just end up in red lines with weighted, because weighted gets you to your legal max, okay, in your general fund. And you can see, starting on the far right, FY18, 19, 20, 21. Again, these are audited numbers right out of the state budget document. You can go to the state website, pull up the legal max spreadsheet, and you should be able to track these numbers. So legal max weighted enrollment FY18 was 24,110 students, what we got paid on. FY19 was 23,007, let's say 717 rounded up. That was about 394 students, FTE less than the year before. FY20 weighted FTE was 22,984. Again, was about 733 FTE than the year before. Add those two numbers together, well over 1,000 FTE than FY18, with some cautious optimism. I'm hoping that our reduction with total weighted would only be in that 280 FTE. And you're thinking, why in the world would you put our surrounding districts? One might think that we're losing students to surrounding districts, and I don't think there's a great deal of evidence to support that. I mean, these numbers are right off their legal max documents. I went out and kind of pulled their legal maxes up, and you know, there's not a mass migration. We're not losing 300 kids a year to surrounding districts. You know, I'm not the demographics person. I can't tell you. I think families are smaller. I think we all see that, but I don't think our county has seen a lot of growth if you look at the demographics overall. And when I see building going on within our district, it seems like it's Rooster Place or, you know, they seem to be retirement communities, not daycare centers. So my point there, page 6, is there's some magnification when you have declining enrollment, and it not only impacts your foundation aid, but it really is magnified when you hit those weights. Why is high density at risk highlighted? And if I only make one point today, please please walk away with this. Tell your lobbyists, tell your neighbors this upcoming legislative session. You see that high density at risk weighting is pretty high for Topeka Public Schools, right? Last year, 883.1. Multiply that times 4436. And that's close to a $4 million number for us because of our density. That weighting was scheduled in the school finance formula to sunset on June 30, 2020. They repaired that legislatively last year, kind of down in towards an emergency last in western Kansas, but for Topeka Public Schools, of our certified friends, a big portion of your salary is out of that at risk. I mean, when 70% of our kids are at risk in special needs, right? A big portion of your salaries are coming out of there. That at-risk fund, if we go back to Code 99 and we look at the $27.2 million in the proposed budget, I can tell you in that at-risk fund, and if you're a teacher in a classroom, a regular ed classroom, there's upwards, depending on your school, there are some schools where 95% of your salary may be at-risk funding, okay? It is a huge part of how we pay salary and benefits. So that is critical that we maintain that in the school financial structure because it's so dependent on how we compensate our instructional team. That's why that line is highlighted. On that page. There's no questions
I just
of
have
that.
one
Go ahead.
question. I know you listed it before, but what students does the state consider at risk? You said preschool.
So in terms of funding, this is the thing that is quite interesting about our system here. What determines an at-risk student? That is a whole laundry list of things, and Sarah and Billy could expand on that if you'd like to see the list. It's a 2-page list. So I'm at risk of not progressing to the next grade level. I'm not reading on grade level. I'm homeless. I'm an English language. There's a whole list of things that make you at risk. You see it, and you can name them. But there's one way to get funding for that kid, for that student, and that's free lunch. They have to apply for and be certified economically as qualifying for free lunch. There's one, the gate's very narrow, kind of like the proverb, right? The gate is very narrow. That is the one indicator that we receive funding is free lunch. Qualify for free lunch. Not reduced, free. So to me, it's a paradox that the list of what we have to, the needs we have to address is 2 pages long. The resources is one line. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's kind of a double standard.
I'm not used to talking this long, so I'm gonna need a little pause.
Tic-tac?
I made tic-tac, right? Okay, let's go to page, what the heck, 7? Is it like kind of a revenue and salary, the one I told you about that had the FTE for staff? Okay. So, and just again, going back, and this is right off our code 6, which is general fund state aid, special education state aid. Want to highlight federal revenue, go back, talk about that just briefly. And just kind of a comparison of that general fund state aid, federal revenue, and what we've experienced in that same window in terms of compensation. And the compensation numbers are district-wide. They're not singled out to just the certified staff. We're all in here. We're all TPS, certified, admin, classified in these numbers. But if you look at, and I kind of mixed it up on you, this time I went left to right in years. I started at FY 18, 19, 20. FY 18, foundation aid was at 4,006. FY 19 was at 4,165. FY 20, 4,436. You look at the period between 18 and 19, 4,165 less 4,006, about $159, about a 4% increase in foundation aid per kid. If you look at code line 95 in the budget document, and you look at our general fund state aid from FY 19, FY 18, our foundation aid grew $391,766, about a half a point. So foundation aid per kid, and if you had a flat enrollment cycle, theoretically, reasonably, you could take every line item in your budget and raise it 4%, right? It would raise all the tides, but when you're going the other way, it's a little difficult because we only got about $391,000 in actual dollars to spend. Even though that foundation aid went up 4%, magnified even further, we go from 4,165 to 4,436. That's a $271 jump per kid, which is a really nice jump. It's a 7% jump. But again, we suffer from those weightings that we just talked about, and we don't see a 7% jump in revenue. We see about a 4.5% jump in revenue. So, you know, when in the last 3 budget cycles, revenue increases 11%, we really kind of saw only about a 7%. Well, not even that, 5% increase in revenue. And you look at federal revenues again, and 16, 17, 17, 18, 18, 19, 19, 20, we've seen some declines in those federal revenues, anticipating again, you know, if you look at 16, 17, 28 million and go to 19, 20, 22 million, again, two areas. Our title dollars have declined in those budget cycles, 2016, 17, prior we had, and prior, just quite honestly, this current administration, we had things like school improvement grants. We had 21st century grants. We had a lot of federal dollars that were beneficial to districts that have the students such as ours, you know, that need more attention. But those are gone. Those dollars, there are no more school improvement grants. They're gone. Our title dollars have continued, I think Billy would attest, to shrink from the good old days of
About $1.3 million.
Yeah. But I do want, you know, thinking, looking at 22.6 million to the 28, again, that's magnified by that number, to your point, Rich, is magnified, or just said a little bit from COVID, because 1.5 of that, all of the bulk of our food service program with our high number of at-risk kids, free kids, is federal dollars. And we just did not see those reimbursement rates because we weren't able to get the volume of meals to those kids. We just didn't get the reimbursements in March through the last quarter of the school year. So we were down about $1.5 million there. Hopefully, if we can get kids back in school buildings learning, we can solve their nutrition needs and solve part of our revenue problem in that food service department. The reason I think that's important, why I gotta mention that, is if you go to Code 24, when we publish the budget, the food service department, our child nutrition program, we really view as a standalone program. It really needs to carry its own weight through reimbursements or sales. We really count on that program, or have historically counted on that program, to support salary benefits, the cost of food, 100% of their equipment, based on the reimbursements we get for delivering nutrition to our students and or food sales. And Nikki Yankee has done a great job, you know, the past probably 10 plus years of doing that. Last year was a tough year. But if our sales or reimbursements don't cover that, the only way you can make the food service department whole is a transfer from the general fund, the supplemental general fund, or contingency reserve. That's the only way you can fix that. General fund, LOB, or any contingency that you have. So you've seen what a bang-up job we've been doing with increasing revenues in our general fund and LOB. You know, one of my struggles and fights this year will be to not have to pull money out of the general fund, LOB, or the contingency to keep our food service program intact, because we have to keep our food service program intact. We don't have a choice. At some point in time, we are going to be providing nutrition to kids in our school buildings. So we have to make sure they remain intact. But that is a real headwind for me, and a difficulty for this upcoming year that I'm concerned about. The other thing, you know, if you look at the staffing, again, I just want to show you what's happened, what we've done with the salaries the last 4 years, and you can see 17-18 compared to 16-17. Overall increase of about 2.3% or 2.6 million. 17-18, certainly, you know, that year we shared with you, our outlook was much more positive. Salary benefit increases, we had some increases in staff, went up about 9.4%. Last year, again, with declining enrollment, we were cautiously optimistic, but overall, salary benefit costs up about 1.5%, still $2 million increase in that spend. And that is salary benefits for those two categories, certified, admin, and classified. Substitute and temps add another people cost. You can look at 16-17, 1.3 million, 17-18, 1.5 million, 18-19, 1.6 million. Looks like those substitute costs kind of creep up on us. Last year, 1,059,271. And I labeled that a false friend because I really think that's a false friend.
We were in school.
Thank you, Lucinda, for recognizing that. I think that would have been upwards of 1.7 million if history had I hope it wouldn't have been, but I went back and those last 3 months seemed like we gobble up those substitute services at a higher rate than even during cold and flu season for some reason. So that's a false friend. That we didn't have a $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 savings for this year. I anticipate that number, if we can get back in school, that we'll probably have a substitute cost at that level. Federal money, and the next couple of pages, I hope you don't have these. And I just want to make a comment on federal money, just because I think there has been philosophically some changes that are a little bit concerning to me. And this has been a recent development, and it involves the CARES Act. And again, I'm not making a judgment necessarily that it's good or bad. COVID-19 has impacted everybody. I understand that, okay? But our CARES dollars are federal dollars, and those were distributed under the same guidelines, auspices as our title dollars. When we received our allocations from the state for the COVID or ESER, CARES Elementary Secondary School Emergency Relief, Topeka Public Schools, CARES total allocation was $3,977,960. $118,977 of those dollars were this calculation was made for us, was CARES non-public allocation. And we allocate a portion of our title dollars every year to non-public schools. We push out title services to many of our local non-publics. So that would have, for Shawnette and I, in anticipation, the district could have $3,858,000 in budget authority for COVID-related expenses. And I'm looking at this, that was dated April 24, 2020. Fast forward to July, and we had some fussing, not just locally, but nationwide from our non-public saying, look, we're in trouble. Where are these dollars? But we've been kind of, like a lot of school districts, we've been patient in distributing our CARES dollars to our non-publics because there hasn't been a definitive guidance on for how to do that. But what's even more interesting, that $118,000 has changed because of some guidance that came down from the U.S. Department of Ed, as led by Betsy DeVos, that the calculation for these dollars really needs to be global in terms of number of students, public, non-public, add them up, and then divvy it accordingly. We initially divided our dollars just like we do our title dollars, and that cost was about $119,000. Under new guidance, that distribution to our non-publics is $580,720, which is okay. I'm not saying that's good or bad. COVID's impacted everybody, but you moved the chess pieces on me here a little bit. About 5 months down the road, we've been pretty busy spending the CARES dollars. So in July, when we thought we had a little over $700,000 left to allocate for needs, CARES-related needs, we really don't. We got to back that up a little bit because we're going to distribute a larger portion of that to our non-public friends. Last week of July. And not only to the non-publics that we deliver services to every year. It includes all non-publics, even those that don't report numbers to Kansas Department of Education. Just a side note that thinking, that mentality of private-public dollars and what how they should be shared with non-public entities, I feel that's been a real shift politically, nationally. And I don't know whether that's a harbinger of things to come. I hope not. But it certainly is where we're at today with that. And I wanted to share that with you because it was something very impactful to the people who manage these budgets to have to stop and recalculate. That's not something we're accustomed to doing with our grant dollars. But that has certainly happened. I understand COVID is a different animal, and the rules seem to be changing kind of as we go along in a lot of arenas. But it really felt here the last 30 days, there was just a real shift in policy in public dollars, non-public schools. So something to keep an eye on for all of us, I think, moving forward. What do we do with our money? And page 8, does page 8 look like instruction expenditures? I hope, does that kind of look like what you guys are looking at? Again, these are our documents that everybody in the world has access to. This is, I'm sorry,
so sorry to interrupt.
that's okay.
I did have one question about staffing. And if we look at the graphs that are so clear on page 5 of continued enrollment decline, then why in 2018, 2019 did we increase staff by 16 staff members? And then last year need to drop those 16 plus an additional 16. I understand Mr. Robbins in explaining wanting to right-size staff, but if it was so apparent that there was a decline that was consistent, why was there that sudden up of 16 staff in 2018-19?
I'll answer that by saying it's a good question. Never should have happened. It should not have occurred.
Well, I think there's been an uptick in, we think of staff, we think of administrative and classified and certified, and I think there's been a general upswing in administrative staff that keeps in line with the initiatives and some of the things that we're continuing to do at a district level. Not that that's the 16, I don't know, but I just think, and then at the same time, I think not only was there an upswing, if I remember correctly, in administrative staff, but I think there was a hiring increase in counselors and other things to try to meet the district initiatives.
Right.
I'm not saying that's where the 16 came from, but I'm thinking back, that's kind of how, if I remember correctly, it's kind of like across the board increase with administrative, classified, certified. But I don't know, I don't have that data in front of me, but just from memory.
I don't have the exact numbers, but I will tell you, the one thing you hit on, absolutely in that time period, what changed is we were selected and accepted part of the mental health initiative statewide. So that meant we hired eight counselors plus, I believe, a supervisor, administrative person to manage that mental health program. Now, so there's 8 of the mental health, and if you're sure, are you familiar with that?
Yes.
Okay, the mental health program. So 8 counselors. Here's the beautiful thing about that first year: 100% of those salary benefits. That program was provided by the state grant. And the next year they expanded the program and quickly reduced our funding by half. So there you go. So we love it. It's just first year was paid by the mental health grant. Second year was, we lost a portion of funding, but we kept all 8 counselors. We kept the program intact. The other thing in that time period I really think you ought to look at is what came on board because of the bond issue. Our preschool program at Shaner, and we're developing that, not only our at-risk, our special needs kids, but also a tuition-based portion of that. So in line with our board's initiatives to make our pre-K program as robust as possible, I would say any increases would be associated with that. The other thing you got to keep in mind that came online is our TCAP program.
So we didn't add teachers at Highland Park, Topeka High, and Topeka West, but we certainly have special instruction now going on at our TCAP facility. And as you know, that state aid, state initiative, Career to Tech Ed is a real push. And the district is really trying to make its best effort to support that as well. We think that's the right thing to do. Another comment though, Career Tech Ed, we opened that as one of the most beautiful buildings, probably within 1,000 miles for that type of learning. We received state aid for 2 years, Career Tech Ed, to transport your students from Topeka High and Highland Park and Topeka West there. Guess what happened in FY21? You guessed it, we're not getting that transportation aid. So you're welcome.
But even with all of those new programs, all of those things are good as far as being able to provide additional opportunities for students, both young and more seasoned students as far as TCAP is concerned. But we have to figure out a way, we should have figured out a way though, to still better align our overall staffing with what the enrollment was. Because the enrollment is what fuels our revenue. And you only have so many dollars to work with. So would it have been challenging to reduce or control the staffing in light of new programs coming on, new buildings being opened up? Yes, it would have been challenging. But we should have figured out a way to make that happen. And because we didn't, that's how we end up in situations like we're faced with today, where, the enrollment continues to decline, and really it is offsetting any gains that we're making as far as increased state aid per pupil. It's sooner or later it catches up with you. Okay?
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. That helps tremendously.
We're gonna jump over to page 8, and then really 8, 9, 10, 11, again, really informational, but for me, I think it's just good that we make the point as a team, all of us, that what do we spend our money on, and the bulk of our dollars, right? We're a people business. You hear over, we're a people business, salary and benefits, but oftentimes schools get beat up that we just don't drive enough dollars into the classroom, and I want to say that's a bunch of hooey. I think we do spend a lot of dollars in the classroom. You just got to understand what's going into the classroom. And if you look at page 8, and I'm just looking at 2019-20 actuals, the things that I've got highlighted, I really think comprise, and these are among the funds of really go into learning. And if you look at overall instructional expenditures, function 1000 in our accounting code, FY 19-20, we spent $105 million, but what I want you to understand is that 91% of that $105 million came from the general fund, the LOB, and other state aid funds, bilingual, special ed, at risk. So what I'm trying to drive home here is that right now, state and local dollars are doing all the heavy lifting. Again, not to sound like a broken record, but we're not seeing those federal dollars that we saw 5 years ago. It is that our state and local dollars are doing the heavy lifting for us. If you go to page 9, expenditure per pupil, same data, but it drives it down into spending per pupil. And again, I think that instruction, student support, instructional support, admin support, and this is something I want to make sure that that's really clear in the budget document. Every time you see it, administrative, right? It doesn't mean the deputy superintendent and Gary and Billy and Sarah. 75% of anything listed in our budget document, administrative, 75% of that is building principals. On the books today, we have 85 administrators, 64 of those are in the school buildings. We have 21 district-wide administrators. 75% of our administrative costs happens in the building. It doesn't happen at the Burnett Center. So I would contend to everybody that if you look at the graph, everything, including administrative and support, left. I think you could take all those blue and red and green dots and stack them on top of instruction, because I really do think that all is supportive of what goes on in the classroom, in my opinion. You know, the other costs, operation and maintenance, we got to keep your air conditioner running and your floors clean. You got to get kids back and forth, school, food services, any type of capital improvements. We need new windows, cameras. That is such a small portion, I think, of our total spend compared to what I really think is going on for support what goes on in the classroom. And that, it really bothers me when I hear folks outside of education say, gee, you know, all those dollars, how come you can't get it in the classroom? Well, I think student support, counselors and instructional support, literacy coaches, I think that is classroom support. I think that is classroom play. I don't think we'd have good instruction without our building principals. Somebody directing the team, somebody calling the plays. But we have a lot of folks outside of education that like to beat us up, that we just don't get enough of those dollars into the classroom. And I contend that we fight every day to get dollars into the classroom. I think we really do. Page 10 is just a summary. Again, all funds, expenditures by function, instruction, student support, instructional support, administrative support. Again, for me, just to reemphasize that when you're all in, if you look at $198,598,000 and you go back to the code 99, you're going to see that same number in 20 actual. I contend 76% of those dollars occur at the building level and are in direct support of students. And all the other things, operations and maintenance, transportation, can't instruct them if we don't get them to school, right? So those are necessary expenses. Capital improvements and debt. But I think we do a good job as a district, a whole, and I'm including you folks. I think we do a good job of trying to get the necessary things in the classroom to help these kids. So I think that's important for our public to understand that. The final document, in page 11, finally, I got down there, everybody breathing a sigh of relief. That guy's going to shut up, probably, right? And I just want you to understand that we have internal and external audiences, and we're all internal audiences in how we manage our budgets, but we also have an external audience, and those are the taxpayers, and I'm sure all of you own homes here in Topeka, as do I. And so we do have constituents that look at the Code 99, and they don't look at anything that we've talked about the last hour. They only look at how much tax is that rascal going to hit me for this year. And we do have people that like to make comment and question, and that's okay. That's their right. That's their right as citizens. But I do think this demonstrates our board, our management team has also, not only to our internal audience, been cognizant of needs, we're also cognizant of our taxpayers' needs as well. And if you look at the last 3 periods, our mill levies have not rocketed up. We haven't done that to our constituents. They've stayed pretty flat with even a slight decline. At the same time, not taking our foot off the accelerator in terms of those operating funds, LOB, capital outlay, and our special liability, our legal funds. So we also have an external audience when we develop this budget that we have in mind. And we think our community at large is important because we're not the only taxing entity, right? I mean, we have the city, the county gets a lick. You look at your tax statements, the library gets a lick. And couple that with we have a pretty large portion of retirees whose income, doesn't go up every year probably. They're not interested in their taxes on their homes increasing. So we're cognizant of that, and we understand that. We try to balance that. It's not an easy balance, but we do try to balance it. That's it. I quit. That is a budget at a glance.
Quick question.
Yeah.
I always hear about the term unencumbered cash.
Mm-hmm.
Did you mention that by chance?
I did not.
Why don't you help me out, because I'm kind of wishy-washy. What is that, and what does that do? How is it utilized, or how much is there?
So in unencumbered cash, at year end, there are funds that you can carry cash over in. The general fund is not one of them. Okay. Let's see if
So if it's not, while you're looking for your paper, if it's not the general fund, what fund?
Right, so we can carry over cash in. Let me tell you the funds we can carry over cash in.
Thank you.
Cannot carry over cash in the general fund. We can, of course, federal funds. We could have carryover cash in, say, our food service. So federal funds. All of our special revenue funds, 4-year-old at risk, special ed, career tech ed, professional development, special liability, we can carry over cash in all of those funds. Special ed, for example, we carry over about $6.5 million in special ed carryover cash. Cannot carry a penny over in the general fund. But we've talked about this before. We don't get a penny of special ed, state aid until October. Special ed is 25% of our budget. So you gotta have cash in that fund if we're gonna hit payroll, right? I mean, it's important because you're not gonna get a penny of state aid for the first quarter. And it usually comes about the last day of the month, okay? But you can carry over cash in those funds. The other thing that you can carry over cash is in your capital outlay. You can reserve cash there. Maybe you have roofing projects, maybe in terms of your 5-year plan, and we look at things beyond this year. In capital outlay, we had $3.29 million left in cash in capital outlay this year. You could spend it to zero, and we try hard to do that sometimes, getting those projects. But here's why you probably don't want to spend capital outlay to zero. In 2010, we had a hailstorm. I don't know if any of you remember that. We had softball-sized hail. Did any of you have to replace a roof?
And a car.
And a car. We replaced 22 roofs, okay, that year. We're insured, but we have this thing called a wind hail deductible. It's currently $150,000 per roof. We'd have that same event, multiply 150,000 times 22 roofs. and you race right up to $2.5–3 million. So when $3.2 million in my bank account would be lovely, and the capital outlay bank account can be spent in one hailstorm. If we were to have, and it happened in 2010, we replaced 22 roofs. So unencumbered cash. The other thing you gotta look at, in our special reserve fund, there's $7.4 million. Okay, in our special reserve. Well, what is special reserve? Special reserve is work comp. Okay, it is the biggest portion of, we're self-insured work comp. Our risk management, so we've got to have some, we have liabilities, right? Our flex spending program, if you participate in the flex spending, we manage that cash. Our dental insurance is self-insured, so your dental bills come out of our self-insured dental fund, okay? We have to have those reserve dollars in that special reserve. It's code 47, I believe, which is $7.4 million this year. That is an increase from last year, but if you remember back from the health insurance conversation, we're not real rosy cheap about our 2022 health insurance plan period. We think we're going to be in for a real battle again next late winter, early spring. And we also anticipate we're going to take some of that cash because I think there's a real possibility that we'll need to be self-insured in order to keep health insurance affordable for all of us. We spend $1.5 million to $2 million a month in healthcare. So think about that for a minute. What kind of reserve? Do you want 1 month reserve or do you want 2 months? We want to make sure we pay our health insurance bill. So that's unencumbered cash balance. Our balances are down a little bit from where they were last year. We do have a contingency reserve of about $3.2 million currently. And that will allow us to meet payroll if in mid-January, state aid per student gets rolled back to $44.36. We spend on average about $500,000 a day in this district, whether it's payroll or the light bill. Spend through our accounts payable department is we spend $500,000 a day. If you don't believe me, go to any board agenda where we have a claims listing and just start looking at those claims listings. This is a fairly large district. We have a lot of buildings, a lot of people. So what really seemed like a large number in some of these funds, I do agree, it is a little overwhelming to look at that, but then when you stop and look at what our spend is within some of those categories, it matches pretty well what our spend is. Part of our unencumbered cash balance is our textbook and student material fund. Currently has about $2 million in it. $2 million sounds like a lot of money in the student material fund, but my friends in education can spend $2 million on student materials in a wink. It doesn't take a large history adoption to change, or a math adoption, or an elementary literacy adoption to spend $2 million. That can happen quickly in one board meeting. The other thing that's, and I talk about this, I think every year, is kind of curious. We have $500,000 of our unencumbered cash as activity funds in your school buildings. That strike you as odd. It's not money we raise, not money I can spend. It's money that your buildings can spend. I don't think the parent club or the people that are selling cookies and the cheerleaders would probably appreciate if I swiped, those accounts. Not that, we would ever do that. Right, it strikes me, but that is part of that unencumbered cash balance. There's $500,000 currently, or close to it, in our unencumbered cash balance is there's still activity funds. We report those. Those I covered just about every, not just about, I covered every, well, food service has a $1.2 million unencumbered cash balance. That's under a 3-month operating. So that's not a 2-year supply of cash for our food service department.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yep.
Good to know.
Any other questions from the team? I think at this point, we'll need a break.
No.
We would take like 5-10 minutes,
I think it's 15.
15.
I'll see if any of the members of the team have any questions or any observations. I had written some questions down as you were talking, Gary, but having sat through this discussion again, you answered them.
Thank you.
So, but I don't know if any other members of the team have it, and frankly, I think we just need a minute away from the table. And 15? All right, 15.
Now I can't even do it. One time, and now I can't ever do it again. So I am working with. No. Yes, so.
So where will we go for that?
I leave my house, and I may head east, somewhere.
Go around the way?
When I go past that.
Yeah.
I'll end up out at somewhere between here and Lawrence. When I run out of the road, I'll turn around and come back, or if I go west, I either go out around Sherwood.
Oh, I know.
It is a hilly
That's
bike, right?
super. We bike around it.
Yeah.
So, a couple mornings I've been past Deputy Superintendent's house about 6 o'clock.
Yeah.
So, it's not like that much, right? Not much traffic,
Yeah.
but it's still, yeah.
Yes. We live out there, not too far from LR. My husband's been trying to run more, just like be more active. He's working from home. He just feels like,
And then, I mean,
he just feels like,
and then, I mean, what cage?
yes, sitting and just, yeah. So he's been trying to run more. So I was like, could our neighborhood be any more?
It's hilly. There's some,
Yeah.
there's some real stones in that neighborhood.
Yes, and several people have expired between March and now, and they've taken care of it. Or they've gotten a new license, or whatever it is. Okay, well, we did. That's what I wanted to ask you before I said that. Okay.
Right, because I didn't know what the circumstances were as far as why she wasn't. I looked back through my reviews of the files. I don't. I looked, and that's what you probably will, and that's what, that's what you probably will, and that's what I wanted to ask you, because like, I don't know what the circumstances. Yes, yes. Oh, wait, Aaron's probably texting me back. Brian, is off today. Well, yeah. Yes, yes. But, because it's now wiped out what you just did. I feel like I confirmed about it when I'm complaining.
Right.
I'm confirming that I'm complaining,
Right.
which is what would make sense.
Okay. I think that's what you do. Yes,
That is weird.
because you just made the changes to
So I'm
decline,
confirming to
and you want to
decline.
confirm the decline, but it's make sure and it's. Because they came up then with the, are you sure? Because if you don't, you will lose coverage, and you're like, yes. So then, yeah.
Supplemental employee pay. What's the difference between that and the life I have under the?
It's extra. If you wanted more than what the board is providing, you can get additional.
That's fine.
Sixth time I've tried to log in. And now I can't do it at a 501 location. Just be at home.
So, the, our math, so we don't know they're doing their masters in education. They have a degree in accounting or something else. They can be in a classroom. I'm not sure about. And a couple of parents, yeah, I went.
They have to have their license. Yeah, they have to have their license.
They have to have at least such.
Right, right. No, yes. Yes, because then, yes, then they could substitute.
And they couldn't see the teacher, right?
Correct, they could not.
I'll go see if we can that.
I'm trying hard to crack down on that. Yeah, I will try to avoid having to do that. Yes. We all don't need extra things to do. Right. Uh-huh. And so, yeah. Yeah, I can't psychology, well, and see, that's what I have, I have, it's not a concentration, it's not a minor, it's a concentration, it's like, it's easy to get. A social, yeah, social science. Right. Monday. I think he said, I think that, but he's gonna get his master's degree. And I, because then if they have 2 language arts. So anyway, but, and he's doing elementary ed, and then he's getting the secondary, yeah. That's what I told him, I said, if you really want to make sure you have a job, science and math. Yes, yes, that's what I've heard a lot. Right. Yeah. Well, that's what, and then he wants, so he's doing elementary ed because, and then he's gonna transition, I guess, in conversing with the head of the program. You can't get the second elementary ed, you have to get elementary ed and then teach, and then you can teach.
Take the crisis.
Yeah, and so that's what he's doing. And it was so funny, he texted me last night, because they broke them up by major, and I said, so how many girls did you? Right? And he said, actually, Mom, it was mostly football. And I said, coaches,